My stepdaughter stole my bank cards and used it to fund her shopping addiction. When I confronted her, her mom, my wife, got angry and insulted me. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Roy James from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. When I married Laura, I didn't just say I do to a woman. I said yes to her past, her pain, and most significantly, her daughter Kayla. I was 45, financially stable, with a thriving logistics business and a tidy suburban home. Laura brought light into my life after years of solitude. She was kind, warm, fiercely loyal, or so I thought. Kayla, on the other hand, was complicated. 20 at the time, she had just dropped out of college and was finding herself, which translated into binge-watching Netflix, posting filtered selfies, and racking up credit card debt like it was a competitive sport. Still, I tried. I offered her a position in my company, not out of obligation, but because I believed people rise when given responsibility. She took the job. She even said thank you. For a little while, it felt like we were a family. I remember thinking, this is what love looks like. Sacrifice. Integration. The messy blending of lives and habits. Laura and I never kept finances completely separate. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, and the groceries. She handled the smaller things, household decor, Kayla's sporadic bills, the occasional spa trip. It never felt unequal, though in hindsight, I was footing 90% of the living expenses while being told I was too business-minded whenever I questioned Kayla's spending. I swallowed it, not because I didn't see it, but because I wanted peace. You learn quickly in blended families that confrontation often feels like betrayal. If I drew a line, I was the problem. If I stayed silent, I was complicit. So I picked silence, over and over, like a coward convincing himself it's wisdom. The first time I gave Kayla my card was during a weekend trip Laura and I took to Napa. Kayla called in a panic. Her debit card had been declined and she needed gas money. Laura handed me the phone with that expectant look. The one that says, "Come on, just this once." I gave her my secondary business card, told her to use it responsibly, and made sure to check the account when we got back. There was a $140 charge from a department store, another from Uber Eats, and one from a nail salon. I gritted my teeth, brought it up at dinner, and Laura said, "She's just a kid." She panicked. She was embarrassed. So I let it go. That was my first mistake. Over the next 2 years, Kayla grew into a curated version of adulthood, always dressed to the nines, phone in hand, sipping overpriced lattes she couldn't possibly afford on her entry-level salary. I tried to see the good. She showed up to work on time. She smiled when clients walked in. She even impressed one of my supervisors with a proposal that streamlined scheduling. But every time she praised herself, it came with an undertone of entitlement, like the world owed her something for showing up. When bonuses were handed out, she asked why hers wasn't bigger. When team lunches happened, she expected me to foot the bill. Still, I rationalized it all. She was young. She'd mature. Laura defended her constantly, and I wanted to believe she was right. I needed to believe it. Looking back, I realize how often I overlooked small betrayals, like when Kayla took my car without asking, or when she borrowed Laura's phone and somehow ended up snooping through mine. Laura would wave it off. "She's just curious," she'd say. But it wasn't curiosity. It was boundary testing. And I failed every single test. I remember one night vividly, our anniversary dinner at a quiet French bistro downtown. I had reserved a private table, ordered her favorite wine, even had the chef prepare her favorite duck confit. Just before dessert, Laura's phone lit up. It was Kayla. She had accidentally overdrafted her bank account and needed money to cover rent. Laura looked at me, not guiltily, not hesitantly, but expectantly. "She's struggling, babe. Can we just help her this once?" I wanted to scream, how many just this once moments are we going to have? But instead, I nodded, and Laura transferred $600 from our joint account. Later that night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake thinking, This doesn't feel like sharing. This feels like bleeding. The funny thing is, no one sees the small sacrifices that build up like sediment in a riverbed. They only notice when the dam breaks. People say, "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" But when you're in it, you think silence is love. You think compromise is noble. What I didn't realize was that I was enabling a pattern, one that would grow teeth and bite the hand that fed it. It wasn't just about Kayla anymore. It was about Laura too, how she excused, justified, and enabled. And how I, in turn, enabled her. I gave too much. I gave until giving felt like self-erasure. That year, Kayla moved into one of the company's leased apartments, a perk we offered junior staff. I covered the deposit. She was supposed to handle the monthly rent, but by month 4, the accounting team informed me she hadn't paid anything. I confronted her. She smiled, unapologetic, and said, "I thought it was part of my compensation." I was speechless. Laura defended her again, claiming it was a miscommunication. That was the night I first felt something crack inside me. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew I was raising someone else's child while being treated like the villain in my own home. I didn't know then just how deep that entitlement ran. I didn't know the extent of what she would take, but I felt it building. In the way she looked at me like I was a walking ATM. In the way Laura would change the subject anytime I brought up finances. In the growing emptiness of a house that once felt like mine but now echoed with decisions I never agreed to. All I wanted was a family. What I got was a lesson. And soon, I would learn it the hard way. It started with a pair of boots. Not just any boots, designer, crocodile embossed, painfully expensive. They showed up on our doorstep in a sleek black box, the receipt still tucked inside. I hadn't ordered them, and Laura didn't even flinch when she saw the label. "Kayla must have used my shipping address," she said casually, cradling her coffee like we were discussing laundry detergent. I checked the name, mine. I checked the card, mine. The total came to $1,285.49. My stomach sank like a stone. I didn't say anything right away. I just took the box into the office and stared at it like it might confess. $1,000 for boots. My boots. My card. That night, I poured a bourbon, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe that it was a fluke. Maybe just that one charge. But as the screen loaded and the transactions poured in, my heart dropped. Sephora, Nordstrom, Revolve, some boutique site I'd never heard of. Each entry was another wound, another swipe of a card I hadn't touched in weeks. The total damage was over $8,000, spread across 3 cards, all under my name. I just sat there in the dark, bathed in the cold glow of betrayal, feeling like an idiot in my own skin. How long had this been happening? How many times had I missed it? Too trusting, too exhausted to check. The next morning, I confronted Laura. We were in the kitchen. Sunlight pouring through the windows, eggs sizzling on the stove, everything deceptively normal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the laptop. I just held up the statements and said, "Kayla's been using my cards." Laura didn't even blink. "Are you sure?" she asked, stirring her coffee. "Maybe it's just a mix-up." That word, mix-up, made my blood boil. A mix-up is a wrong delivery or a late payment. This was theft. I laid out the charges, the shipping address, the timestamps. I even pulled up the security footage from our doorbell camera. Kayla accepting the packages. Kayla laughing into her phone, arms full of bags like it was Christmas morning. "She probably thought you wouldn't mind," Laura said, setting her mug down too gently. That was the moment I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, not violently, but with that terrifying quiet of realization. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even pretending to be. She was defending her daughter like it was second nature. And maybe it was. I looked at her and said, "That's over $8,000, Laura." $8,000. Her response, "You make that in a week." Just like that. No apology. No ownership. Just a slap in the face wrapped in a smile. That night, I stayed in the guest room. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a mess of questions I didn't want answers to. Had this been going on since Napa? Had Kayla memorized my card numbers? Had Laura helped her? That last thought made my stomach churn. I wanted to believe Laura didn't know. I wanted to believe this was all Kayla's doing. That maybe she was just immature, addicted to shopping, lacking impulse control. But Laura's calmness, her flippant dismissal, that shook me. Because it meant she didn't see it as wrong. She saw it as normal. She saw me as the ATM who wasn't supposed to complain. The next day, I went to the office early. I avoided Kayla all morning. But around lunchtime, I saw her strutting into the break room, head held high, wearing the very boots that started it all. She spotted me and gave a mock salute. "Thanks for the early birthday gift," she chirped. I stared at her, heart pounding, every word I wanted to scream tangled in my throat. I managed to say, "We need to talk." She rolled her eyes. "If it's about the card, Mom said you were being dramatic. It's not like I bought a car or something." I couldn't take it. I told her right then and there that she was suspended pending investigation. Her expression changed instantly, from smug to shocked to furious. "You can't do that," she snapped. "This is my job." I looked her in the eye and said, "Not anymore." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. But even as the door closed behind me, I knew this wasn't over. Laura would come storming in next. And she did, an hour later, red-faced and shaking. She didn't ask for context. She didn't want proof. She just screamed. "You embarrassed her," she shouted. "You humiliated her in front of the entire office. You're supposed to be a father figure, not a tyrant." I stood my ground, arms crossed, face unreadable. "A father figure?" I asked. "A father doesn't get robbed by his daughter." Laura's lip curled like she didn't even recognize me. "She's my daughter," she spat. "And maybe if you weren't so obsessed with money, you'd understand that she was just scared to ask." That broke me. Because it told me everything I needed to know, not just about Kayla, but about Laura. About how far they'd go to twist the truth. How deep the entitlement ran. There was no remorse. No sense of boundaries. Just a shared delusion that my success was theirs to spend, my resources theirs to exploit. I told her I needed space, and she laughed, actually laughed, like I was being melodramatic. So I went to a hotel. 3 days. That's how long it took for me to call my lawyer. I wasn't ready to divorce her yet, not quite, but I was done pretending this was salvageable. I had my cards reissued, changed passwords, froze accounts, installed additional cameras. Every move I made was met with anger or guilt tripping. Kayla sent me a passive-aggressive text. "Thanks for ruining my life. LOL." Laura sent nothing. At the hotel, I sat on the bed with the TV on mute and stared out the window at the city skyline. I wasn't grieving. I was waking up. There's a difference. Grief is for something you lost. This was about something I'd never really had. A wife who protected me, a stepdaughter who respected me, a family that honored the trust one gave so freely. The strangest part? I wasn't even angry anymore. I was numb. And in that numbness, a clarity began to rise. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't cruel. I was just finally drawing the line that should have been drawn years ago. They took something from me, but I was about to take it all back. I returned home on a Tuesday evening, just after sunset, when the sky was still bruised purple and the air heavy with silence. I parked outside the house I'd paid for, stared at the front door for a moment, and felt like a trespasser. It had only been 3 days, but it felt like years since I'd stepped foot inside with the certainty that I belonged. Now, it felt like enemy territory. I unlocked the door slowly, quietly, hoping absurdly that no one would be home. But of course, they were. Laura was on the couch, arms crossed like she'd been rehearsing this moment. Kayla stood in the hallway behind her, phone in hand, already filming. As if my return was some kind of reality show drama, and she needed content for her followers. I didn't say a word. I just walked in, set my bag down, and braced for war. "You couldn't even call?" Laura said, standing now, her voice laced with controlled fury. "You disappear for 3 days, and then come back like nothing happened?" I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even worried. She was just angry. Because I'd broken the pattern. Because I'd finally done something unpredictable. "Where's your ring?" she snapped, eyes narrowing. I lifted my hand slowly. The ring was in my pocket. I had taken it off the night I left, but I hadn't had the heart, or maybe the courage, to throw it away. Yet, I didn't come back to fight, I said. "But we are going to talk." Kayla scoffed. "Oh, here we go," she muttered. "Another one of your lectures about money and boundaries." I turned toward her, and for the first time in years, I didn't hold back. "You stole from me," I said flatly. Thousands of dollars. You used my cards, without permission, for weeks. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. She laughed. God, you are so dramatic. You're acting like I drained your entire account. Laura stepped between us, her hand raised like a shield. She's not a criminal. She's your stepdaughter. She made a mistake. I shook my head. No, Laura. A mistake is one unauthorized charge. This was a choice. Over and over. And you defended her. The room pulsed with tension. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. Kayla crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, clearly unbothered. You're just mad you can't control me anymore, she said. This whole thing, firing me, freezing your cards, running off to a hotel, you're throwing a tantrum. Laura didn't stop her. She didn't even flinch. And that silence told me everything. I looked back at my wife and said, she doesn't respect me. And you don't respect me either. You didn't even try to understand. You just assumed I was wrong. Laura's face twisted into something I hadn't seen before, resentment, maybe even hatred. You've always held money over our heads, she hissed. Every gift came with strings. Every favor came with a lecture. You act like a saint, but all you do is keep score. I felt something burn in my throat. Not tears, not quite. Just the raw sting of betrayal. Keeping score, I echoed. Laura, I paid for everything. The house, the cars, the insurance, the trips. I gave Kayla a job when no one else would hire her. And when she stole from me, you defended her. You called me the villain. She stepped forward, her voice rising. Because you care more about your bank account than your family. That was it. That was the knife to the chest. I stared at her for a long, agonizing second. And then I said, calm and low, I care about trust. I care about integrity. But you care about comfort. You let her walk all over me because it was easier than parenting. And now you're angry because I finally said enough. Silence fell between us, thick and deafening. Kayla was still filming, whispering something under her breath to her phone. I turned to her, finally done holding back. You're fired, Kayla. Permanently. You're not coming back to the company. And I'll be reviewing every transaction you've made with my cards. If I find anything else, I'll press charges. Her jaw dropped, the phone slipping slightly in her hand. You wouldn't dare, she spat. Mom, tell him he can't do this. Laura stepped toward me, face pale now, suddenly realizing this wasn't a bluff. You're really going to throw us out? She asked, voice trembling for the first time. I'm going to divorce you, I said. And yes, I'm taking back everything that's mine. The house is in my name. The cars. The business. You'll get what's fair in court, but don't expect anything more. Not after this. I saw the fear bloom in her eyes then, real fear. Not sadness. Not guilt. Just the cold realization that the safety net was gone. The man she leaned on, excused away, manipulated, he wasn't playing along anymore. Kayla stormed upstairs, screaming something I didn't bother catching. Laura just stood there, frozen, watching as the fantasy unraveled. I picked up my bag and headed to the guest room, locking the door behind me. That night, I lay on the stiff mattress and stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of arguing on the other side of the house. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled, only to find the air was colder than I remembered. By morning, I'd called my lawyer and started the formal paperwork. Laura begged for a conversation. Not reconciliation, just clarity, she said. But I knew better. Clarity wasn't what she wanted. What she wanted was control, a say in how this narrative would unfold, a last chance to twist the story into something where she was still the victim. I declined. I left the house that afternoon, told her she had 2 weeks to move out. She cried then, finally. Real, messy crying. She said I was cruel, said I was abandoning them, said I never loved them. But she was wrong. I had loved them. Too much, maybe. Enough to ignore every red flag, every warning sign, every quiet voice that told me something wasn't right. But love doesn't mean you let people rob you of your dignity. Love doesn't mean you live under siege in your own home. This was my line, and I wasn't crossing back over it. I watched the movers carry out the last of Laura's things on a gray Thursday morning. It had been 12 days since I told her to leave, 12 long, echoing days where the house transformed from shared space into battlefield, then into a hollow monument of everything I once believed in. She hadn't spoken to me since that night in the living room, aside from a few clipped texts about logistics and one overly polite email asking if I'd reconsider the timeline. I didn't. I stayed firm. Cold, maybe. But after everything, I couldn't risk thawing out again. I'd made the mistake of softening once. That mistake cost me more than money. It cost me my peace. The house felt haunted while they packed. Not by ghosts, but by moments. Laughter in the hallway that once sounded real. The way Laura used to hum when she cooked. Kayla's high heels on the hardwood stairs. Every sound now carried a bitterness that clung to the walls like smoke. I walked through each room slowly, watching the shadows of our life scatter and shrink. The upstairs closet, once filled with her sweaters and perfume, now sat open and bare, its emptiness more honest than it had ever been full. I found an old photo tucked in the corner behind a shoe box. Me and Laura at our wedding, Kayla off to the side, arms crossed, half smiling. Even then, she hadn't wanted to be part of it. I left the photo on the dresser. I didn't want it. The car was the last thing to go. A white Audi SUV I'd purchased 2 birthdays ago because Laura had mentioned in passing how much she liked it. I never even drove the thing. It was hers. Well, legally mine, but functionally hers. When the tow truck arrived to repossess it, Laura stood at the end of the driveway like she might physically stop it. I watched from the porch, arms folded, heart pounding in that familiar rhythm of conflict, steady, tired, resolute. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. But her face, God, her face. It looked like someone had died. Maybe someone had. Maybe it was the version of me she thought would never walk away. I hope you're proud, she muttered as the driver clicked the last latch. You got what you wanted. I stepped down slow, controlled. No, Laura, I didn't want this. I wanted a partner. I wanted to be respected. But you chose her over us. And you let her steal from me. She's my daughter, she said sharply, voice cracking. What was I supposed to do? Let you ruin her future over a few shoes? I stared at her. She ruined her own future. I just stopped protecting her from the consequences. There was nothing left to say after that. She turned, climbed into the car her friend had brought, and drove off without looking back. Just like that, it was over. A 5-year marriage reduced to paperwork and silence. Inside, the house echoed differently now. I wandered into the kitchen, opened a bottle of scotch I'd been saving for God knows what, and poured myself a double. The first sip burned. The second brought tears I didn't expect. Not from grief, no, that had burned off weeks ago. These tears came from something more complicated. Exhaustion. Relief. The kind of sorrow that creeps in when you realize you've been holding up an illusion for years, convinced it was a foundation. I sat at the kitchen island and pulled out my laptop. My lawyer had sent over the final filings that morning. No contest. No alimony. Just a clean severance. I clicked through the pages like I was watching someone else's life unfold. My signature looked foreign now, like it belonged to a man who hadn't yet learned that generosity without boundaries is just self-destruction in disguise. The company had stabilized after Kayla's exit. There was a brief flurry of gossip, some whispered resentment from staff who thought I'd acted too harshly. But once the dust settled, the office breathed easier. No more missed deadlines. No more last-minute cancellations. I hired someone new, quiet, competent, eager to learn. Watching them work reminded me what it felt like to build something with people who respected it, who respected me. But the public fallout wasn't as clean. Kayla had taken to social media like it was her last stand. Instagram stories of her crying in the car. TikToks with dramatic text overlays. When your stepdad fires you and kicks you out for shopping too much. She even tried to claim I'd emotionally abused her. One post showed our house with a caption that read, "Lived here for years. Now I'm homeless because I bought shoes." It was manipulative, infuriating, but I didn't respond. I let her spiral. Because the truth doesn't need defense, it just waits. Friends reached out. Some curious, some concerned. A few took sides. One mutual acquaintance texted me, "Man, you really blindsided her." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. She drained my accounts and laughed in my face. I didn't blindside her. I opened my eyes. Days passed, then a week, then another. The quiet settled in like dust, soft and unrelenting. I found myself enjoying the solitude in ways I hadn't expected. I started cooking again, simple things like omelets and roasted vegetables. I played jazz in the evenings. I took walks at dusk. Every small act felt like reclamation. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was mine again. And for the first time in years, it felt like peace. One night, I stood by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. My reflection stared back at me, older, maybe, but clearer, more defined. I wasn't the man who married Laura anymore. I wasn't the man who handed Kayla his card and said, just this once. I was the man who finally said enough. And while part of me mourned the years lost, the money gone, the trust shattered, I also felt something like pride. Not loud, not smug, just quiet and rooted. This was the house we built, and then tore apart. But what came next, that would be mine alone. It rained the morning they came to pick up the rest of Kayla's things. 3 plastic bins, a cracked mirror, and a cheap vanity desk she'd insisted on hauling upstairs 2 summers ago. I watched through the living room window as she and one of her college friends loaded everything into a dented Honda Civic. She wore sunglasses, even though the clouds hung low and heavy, and kept her hood pulled tight over her head like she was trying to hide from the world, or maybe from herself. Her friend didn't say much, just lifted and packed like they were racing against some invisible clock. I didn't go outside. I didn't speak to her. I just watched her leave, watched the car back out slowly and turn onto the wet street, the tires cutting ripples through the puddles. When the taillights disappeared, I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty driveway like it had something more to say. For years, that spot had been hers. First in the used Altima Laura helped her buy, then in the Audi I had foolishly signed over. That driveway had seen late-night arrivals, hungover departures, slammed doors, and tearful phone calls. Now it saw nothing, just rain pooling in silence. And yet, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel relief. I felt stillness, the kind that doesn't cheer or mourn, the kind that just is. That week, I cleared out the upstairs room Kayla used to call hers. I found receipts shoved into drawers, expired tanning lotion, a box of fake lashes, and an old notebook filled with half-baked business ideas. Kayla's Closet, Glow Up by Kayla, C.O. Bay. I flipped through it, half curious, half numb. The dreams were childish, scattered, but oddly sincere. Part of me wanted to feel pity. Another part wanted to burn the whole thing. I didn't do either. I boxed it up, labeled it storage, and stuck it in the garage. I wasn't sure why. Maybe a piece of me still hoped she'd grow up one day, reach out, try to make amends. But hope was a dangerous thing, and I was done feeding it. Work became my sanctuary. With Kayla gone and the internal chaos settled, productivity surged. My staff seemed lighter, freer, more focused. There were fewer whispers in the hallways, fewer passive-aggressive emails, and a noticeable drop in urgent requests for personal time off. It was as if the entire office had exhaled. I began to see just how deeply her entitlement had infiltrated the culture, how people had tiptoed around her because of who she was. My wife's daughter. The boss's stepchild. Untouchable. And now, removed, the equilibrium was returning. I hated that I hadn't seen it sooner. Hated that I'd been so desperate to hold on to family that I'd allowed my business to bleed from the inside out. But not everyone approved of how I handled things. One of Laura's cousins posted a long, cryptic Facebook rant about rich men who punish women for not being obedient. I didn't reply. A mutual friend messaged me to say Kayla had applied for a job at a rival company and was telling people I blackballed her. I hadn't. I wouldn't. But truth was a currency she never valued much. The worst blow came from my own sister, Melanie. She called one night, cautious, delicate. "You know I love you," she said, "but don't you think you were a little harsh?" I bit my tongue. I wanted to yell. I wanted to ask her where she'd been when I was waking up at 3 a.m. in cold sweats, wondering how I'd let my own home become a nest of manipulation. Instead, I said, I did what I had to do. She sighed. "I just hope you're not isolating yourself." That word, isolating, cut deep. Because maybe I was. The quiet was starting to wear differently now. Not lonely, exactly, but exposed. There was no one to blame anymore. No chaos to manage. Just me, the house, and the echo of choices I'd made with my eyes finally open. Some nights I sat on the back deck with a drink in my hand and the stars above, trying to remember when it all started unraveling. Not just the cards or the money, but the trust, the love. I'd loved Laura deeply, and I tried to love Kayla. Tried to build something that felt like family. But you can't build on rot. You can't pour your heart into a cracked vessel and act surprised when it all leaks out. The silence made space for questions I'd avoided for years. Had I been too generous? Too eager to play hero? Was my need to be needed what attracted Laura in the first place? Or had we both worn masks we didn't know how to remove? It was easy to call her a gold digger in hindsight. Easy to reduce Kayla to a manipulative brat. But the truth was, I saw the signs. I just ignored them. I wanted to believe love could smooth over the jagged edges. That patience and money and presence could replace history and blood. But family doesn't come with receipts. And loyalty, when one-sided, turns into servitude. I started therapy, twice a week, with a soft-spoken man named Greg who wore cardigans and let silence do half the work. He didn't judge, didn't push, just asked good questions. Why did you stay? What did you hope would change? What does respect look like to you? I didn't always have answers. But saying things out loud, naming the gaslighting, the erosion of self, helped. It made the narrative real, tangible. And with each session, I reclaimed pieces of myself I didn't know I'd surrendered. I also started dating again. Nothing serious. Just coffee here, dinner there. Mostly awkward, sometimes pleasant. A few good conversations. One woman, a high school counselor named Deanna, had a laugh that made me forget the weight I carried. We didn't talk about exes, just books and music and the little absurdities of life. It felt human, normal, not a performance, not a negotiation. Just two people sharing space without hidden ledgers. The driveway stayed empty for a while. Then one day, I parked a new car there, sleek, dark gray, nothing flashy, just reliable. It felt symbolic, somehow. Like closing a chapter not with rage, but with renewal. I stood beside it, staring up at the house I'd reclaimed. It looked the same paint, same windows, but it felt different. Lighter, like it had been exorcised of its false promises. I walked inside, locked the door behind me, and felt, finally, like I was home. It's strange how silence teaches you things noise never could. In the months that followed the divorce, I found myself drawn to quiet places. Bookstores, walking trails, the kind of cafes that don't play music unless someone requests it. I didn't crave distractions anymore. I craved stillness. Not the numbing kind that follows trauma, but the clarity that comes when you finally stop spinning your wheels in someone else's mess. The house had settled into its new rhythm, the rooms no longer echoing with footsteps I didn't trust. I started opening the curtains again, letting the sun touch places that hadn't felt light in years. I rearranged the living room, painted the guest room, even planted a few herbs on the back patio. It was small, steady work, but it was mine. Every change I made was a declaration. This is my space now. My peace. My line in the sand. I kept a journal during those weeks, not because I fancied myself a writer, but because I needed a place to put all the thoughts I hadn't dared speak aloud. On one page, I wrote a list titled, Things I Mississippi. It had 4 bullet points. Laura's laugh when she let her guard down, Sunday morning coffee with no phones, the idea of Kayla growing into someone better, and the illusion that I had built something that would last. That was the hardest part. Not losing them, but losing the story I had told myself about who we were. I didn't miss Kayla's entitlement or Laura's dismissiveness. I missed believing we were a team, that I wasn't alone in the effort. But that belief, I realized, had been a fantasy. A beautiful one, but a fantasy nonetheless. What I learned was this: love without boundaries becomes sacrifice. And sacrifice, when it's not mutual, becomes self-erasure. I had loved with an open hand, given freely, hoping it would be enough to build loyalty, to shape character. But what I'd given became expected. My generosity had been recast as obligation. And when I finally said no, they didn't blink. They didn't apologize. They retaliated. That was the part that still stung. Not the theft, not the lies, but how quickly I became disposable once I stopped giving. People told me I was brave for walking away. I don't feel brave. I feel tired. Not regretful, not broken, just done. Like I've walked out of a long, loud room into the hush of a library, and I'm still adjusting to the quiet. I've thought about reaching out to Laura a few times. not to rekindle anything, but to ask if she ever truly loved me, or if I was always just a solution to her problems. But I never do. I already know the answer. And even if she said the words, I wouldn't believe them now. Love that makes you doubt yourself isn't love, it's leverage. Kayla's been silent, too. No texts. No attempts to fix things. Last I heard, she was staying with a friend, bouncing between temp jobs, trying to launch an online business selling influencer starter kits. I want to hope she'll grow up, that this experience will force her to look inward, to see where she went wrong. But I can't hold my breath for that. I've stopped writing alternate endings in my head. She'll either learn or she won't. That's her journey now. I've stepped off that path for good. The company is thriving again. We just secured a major contract with a regional supplier, steady income, long-term potential. My team seems happier, more confident. I've been more present, more engaged, more myself. One of my employees, Luis, a quiet guy from HR, told me, "You seem lighter these days." And he was right. I wasn't carrying their weight anymore. I wasn't waking up wondering if I'd be ambushed at breakfast or guilt-tripped over dinner. I was just living freely, responsibly, on my terms. There are still hard days. Days when I wonder how I let it go on for so long. Days when I question if I was too harsh, too swift, too final. But then I remember the look in Laura's eyes when I told her I was done, not hurt, not heartbroken, just stunned that I had finally stopped playing along. And I remember Kayla's laugh when she called my confrontation dramatic, like stealing from someone who fed you was no big deal. And I know I did the right thing, because boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. Sometimes I sit on the back patio in the evenings, a book in my lap, the herbs swaying gently in the breeze, and I think about everything I walked away from. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. They showed me who they were, and I finally believed them. The version of me who stayed silent for peace, he deserved better. The version of me who kept giving until he was empty, he deserved rest. The version of me who walked away and never looked back, he finally got it. There's power in reclaiming your own story, in saying, this is where it ends. This is what I won't accept. This is what I choose next. I may have lost a marriage, a house full of noise, and a stepdaughter who never saw me as more than a wallet, but I gained something greater. Myself. My voice. My peace. And I'll never trade that for anyone again. If you found this story compelling, share it with someone who's faced betrayal behind closed doors, and don't forget to follow for more raw, emotionally honest tales about the complexities of family, loyalty, and the strength it takes to finally choose yourself. See you soon in the next one.